Good morning, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Neil from Neil Kuschel, who's CEO of Europe for Global E. And today we'll be talking about, amongst other things, the impact of COVID-19 on cross-border e-commerce. Welcome, Neil.
Nice to be here.
So you'll be speaking in the cross-border track as part of the e-commerce and technology for marketing events.
Yep.
And we'll be talking a lot about how COVID-19 has accelerated the shift towards online shopping. So we've seen a really strong e-commerce strategy is really crucial for merchants. Consumers are becoming very aware of the convenience and simplicity of online shopping, and cross-border is a huge part of that, with really strong growth that we've seen. Even before pre-pandemic figures, we've seen an absolute explosion really in that cross-border e-commerce. And you work with a lot of retailers and brands, and you can give us a bit more flavour and some insights into some of that global and very competitive e-commerce market. So I'm delighted to be joined today, Neil. Thank you for taking part. And you've published some recent research that showed cross-border online sales increased dramatically for the first half of the year, which we would expect, I suppose, with COVID-19. But how much of that is down to COVID-19, and do you think this will continue as part of the new normal, or how do you see that shift towards online shopping progressing in future?
Yeah, it's been a crazy time. So I think what's difficult is trying to establish whether anything's settled down. Is there a new normal? I don't think so yet. I'm not sure people really know quite where they stand. As we speak, the government in the UK is about to announce further restrictions and lockdowns. So I think what we can do is we can talk to what we've seen, which effectively was at the start of the pandemic in Europe around mid-February. Things started to really slow down in the cross-border market, and I think people weren't sure what was going on. But then by the time you hit mid-March, the bottom out had recovered, and then when we went through March, April, May, and on to today, the e-commerce cross-border market has boomed, much higher than it was pre-pandemic levels. And I think we've seen very different results in different geographies. So we saw that Asia went into it first, came out of it first. Europe went into it later and then came out of it later. Some places like the Middle East never really saw a dip, but then saw a massive rise in sort of April, May, June time, particularly when you had Ramadan, you had Eid, you had the shopping centres in the Middle East all got closed down for coronavirus reasons, which meant that people just bought online. And what we've seen then is, as they come down, things haven't come down to the same level that they were at before. They're still sort of 20% higher than they were. So I think what it's done, there was already a trend towards people buying cross-border, and it's speeded up that trend. How much has it speeded up? 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, in 6 months? It's hard to tell. But I think as we see people just get used to the fact that they can buy cross-border, and it's not so hard, and they see the range of items that are available to them from so many stores in so many countries, that I think whilst I'm nervous about the new normal, I think it's becoming far more normal for people to be prepared to buy online, and specifically cross-border, if the experience is right.
Great. And we talked a bit about, you mentioned some of the different geographies, but coming back to sort of thinking about the UK, thinking about Brexit, which is very much looming in the background, what should brands be doing to prepare? How is this going to impact, not just in the UK, but generally cross-border e-commerce strategies? What are your customers saying to you about Brexit?
Well, we operate around Europe. We've got brands all across Europe and the US and Asia as well. So we get to speak to different brands in different places. If we talk about UK specific brands based here wanting to ship, the big thing obviously to be aware of is how you're going to trade in January once the UK exits the transition period. There may be a deal. And so potentially it may all go away and it not be a problem. However, we can't really rely on that. So we've got to be prepared that at the point at which the transition period ends, there may be paperwork required for shipments into Europe. There may be tax and duty regulations required into Europe. there will probably be differences in the way that we're going to then, manage VAT across the EU, things like that. So brands need to be ready. Because we operate for 400 brands already, effectively we take that pain away. So we've prepared everything in order to be able to do that. So what we need to be able to do is make sure that there's commercial invoices going into Europe, which currently there often may not be. That if those commercial invoices can be uploaded electronically, that's done rather than through paper. Brands need to think about what their customs and duty strategy will be. Are you going to get your customers in Europe to pay tax and duty? Are you going to build it into the product price? Are you going to mix and match? And having that strategy in place is what's quite important. Now, on a positive side for UK brands, there's a very high chance that actually, let's say a duty rate into Europe might only be 5 or 6%. There's a very high chance that sterling will devaluate by 5 to 6% anyway, which means that there's a good chance for a British brand that's selling into Europe actually may not become that more expensive in euro terms to their customers. So that's quite a positive. But being prepared for all those things is important, and that's just the actual selling part. Then there's the getting it there, and that's probably going to be more of a challenge. What's going to happen with logistics, particularly what's going to happen on the Channel Tunnel for things that get trucked across into Europe. Which carriers are going to be able to perform well, which carriers are not, how that's going to be managed. So we are integrated with 15 different carriers that ship in from the UK into Europe, and all of them are suggesting that it's going to be slightly different. And so, from a plus side, it means that we can mix and match and switch between those 15 as required. But as a brand, it's important to have both your transactional strategy relating to tax and duty and paperwork, and your logistics strategy related to physically getting it to your consumer.
It's a lot to think about. It's a lot going on, and it must be quite tough as well for some of the smaller retailers out there, because it's that there's COVID, there's shifting strategies, there's Brexit that we're talking about, preparing all the different parts of the journey. There's a lot to think about, and it's also very crowded and competitive market. How are brands still standing out? How are they taking on all of that, thinking about COVID, thinking about Brexit, but making sure that they still stand out, that they stay competitive, that they're drawing in these new international shoppers, retaining existing customers? What are some of the tips that you have on that regard?
Well, that's sort of a double-edged sword for these nimble entrepreneurial businesses.
Yeah.
It's on one hand, it's very difficult to compete with the big boys in terms of the structure and managing tax and duty and logistics, and they don't have huge volumes to get access to the rates they need to be able to ship effectively. So on that side, it's difficult. On the flip side, they are entrepreneurial, small, nimble businesses that aren't constrained by the big, slow supply chains sometimes of the bigger companies. And they can adapt quickly to their individual consumer needs. And so it's a question of merging both together. It's retaining the core focus on what they're good at and knowing their customer and what their customer wants, and then incorporating that with being able to work with companies that can help them compete with the big boys in terms of all the other logistical side of things. So that's on the physical movement. In terms of the consumer experience, here's the other part that I think is important. Consumers around the world are far more savvy now, and they will shop around to make sure that they're getting a right deal. They don't want to pay excessive amounts for shipping. They do want to pay in their own currency. They do want to be able to pay with their own payment methods on their mobile phone. And if as a small brand you don't have that flexibility, then often the consumer will go somewhere where it's easy, because a big portion of consumers buying online cross-border, it's availability of the product that they can't get locally and at a good price, but also they want it to be simple. People want to buy online in an easy way, and particularly when you want them to come back again. If they have a painful first experience buying, the chance of them coming back for a repeat purchase are going to be hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. So simplicity is key. So is agility, adaptability, flexibility. So just to close out, Neil, I'd love to hear from you. It is a really interesting time for retailers. It's challenging, but there is also opportunity, as we've spoken about. What are your predictions as we go into next year, as we start to look ahead? Retailers already thinking about Christmas, of course. How do you see the market evolving, and what should be on everyone's radar as we kind of look ahead to 2021?
Yeah, there's so many things. I think Black Friday will be interesting with a far less focused approach on bricks and mortar. What's that going to mean for Black Friday deals? Are people going to be online longer? Are the sales going to start earlier? Are they going to go later? We saw Black Friday has spread from being a weekend to a week.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to go longer? Yeah, that's the imminent thing. Then you've got Brexit. Then I think when we get to March, April, May, and yeah, we're out of the winter, and coronavirus hopefully is becoming a thing of the past. Brexit has been sorted and is a thing of the past, and there's a vaccine and people are moving forward. Then I think we'll be in a position to view it. But I think what we are seeing is we're seeing brands sort of sit into two parts. A bunch of brands going, look, global e-commerce cross-border is here to stay. I have to be on the front foot. I want to get on the front foot and take advantage of the opportunities now, and really start pushing it forward quickly. And we've got other brands who are saying, look, I'm going to focus on my bricks and mortar, challenges today, and then I'm going to worry about it in the new year. And it's horses for courses, I guess. But I think the one thing that everybody is aligned on is that it's not a question of should I do global cross-border e-commerce. It's when am I going to do it and how am I going to do it, and am I going to build it out myself and hire the expertise? Am I going to try to work with companies who can help us do it, or somewhere in the middle?
Brilliant. Well, Neil, thank you so much for joining me. And you can catch Neil speaking about the impact of COVID and everything that you can expect really for the future of cross-border e-commerce as part of the eCommerce Expo on the 29th of September. So that's at 10:35 in the dedicated cross-border track. Neil, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. My pleasure.
Bye.